Hi, welcome to Globant webinar, Understanding Enterprise Mobility. In the current globalized workplace, enterprises are now more than ever extending their internal solutions via mobile devices to enhance employee and partner productivity. Our webinar discussion will revolve around bring your own devices policies, enterprise app store implementations, mobile device management solutions, and mobility goals for a successful transition towards a fully connected and mobilized employee and partner. We will analyze trends, compare alternative benchmark solutions, and lay out the foundation for future decisions regarding enterprise mobility. We invite you to learn from our experts about enterprise mobility strategies and alternatives. Our speakers today are going to be Andrew Burger, General Manager of Mobile at Globant, Hernan Pentimali, Mobile Technical Director at Globant, Javier Seaman, VP Mobile Technology at Globant, and our guest speaker, Cimarron Booster, VP Business Development at Aperion. These are the topics we are going to address today. A quick overview about Globant and Aperion, enterprise mobility, bring your own device trend, management solution and comparison, develop and incorporate mobile apps, the enterprise mobile apps challenge, and a little bit of a looking ahead of this trend. I'm going to give the word to Hernan Pentimali. He's going to talk about enterprise mobility.
Good morning, everyone. These companies have been developed mobile software for many years. This is nothing new. What is really new is the way that they are developing software and the challenges that they face. This is very easy to see if we took some points as different between how they did it before and how they are doing it right now. The first and main thing that has been changing over the years is that a couple of years ago, let's say 5 years ago, almost no one will allow an employee to bring their device and run software from the company on that device. Right now, for different reasons, that's a very, very common practice. It's that common that it even has an acronym, that is bring your own device. And also, normally the companies allow the employees to run software in their own devices, but they also give devices from the company to the employees for running the company software and also using their personal software, like issuing iPhones to the employees to run company software and letting them use their personal email and install apps from the App Store. That's a very common case. Not only at the app level, but also as a network access level, that has been changing a lot. I mean, years ago, devices were secure as much as possible from the point of view of which network devices could connect to and which email accounts devices connect to. Right now, more and more companies are letting the users choose which networks they will connect to and let the users leverage on their home networks or public Wi-Fi. So the fact of where the user connects should be no longer a factor, but something to take into account when protecting the data. A couple of years ago, also, the boundary between the office, where the office is, and the home were well defined. I mean, people used to work in a position, in a box, in an office, or some other people used to work at home. But right now, more and more people are switching between home and the office. So that makes working from a mobile device very very something that the people is using more and more. I mean, they have the devices with them, and they need to connect to whatever network they have. So the line between where the people is working and when the people is working is getting very blurred. So people used to work a bit on the morning, and right now, I mean, people right now work a bit in the mornings, perhaps another bit on the afternoons, and in the middle they do personal things. So there's no a fixed schedule of time where they can be controlled. So application developers need to be aware of that and secure the applications to support those scenarios. Another main thing that is not exclusive of mobile, but it's very, very common, is that years ago the mobile enterprise applications were not really appealing and were designed to be functional, secure, and to have as many features as possible. Right now, people is more used to use great applications that looks well and feels well and offer great usability. So employees will expect that level of functionality and great user experience from any application, including applications that the company developed for them. So as a result, they won't use, or they will train to use less applications that are not well designed and doesn't feel well and doesn't offer usability, because people are becoming experts in some form of usability because they know. And the last point of view to try to compare how they worked before and now is that the devices used to sync up using corporate networks only. Right now, companies trying to support so many different scenarios that they trying to let and to plan and to architect applications to support mainly synchronization from outside the corporate network, and that's a scenario that companies live with right now. To exemplify some of the trends, I think these numbers speak for themselves. For example, Information Week says in a survey that the 72% of the companies that they asked will or have already support some kind of bring your own device program. That's a huge number. The other number is that I think this is something that is public and has been changing over the years, is that the market has been shifting toward Android, iOS, and Windows Phone, leaving behind a bit to the king of that market, the king of the corporate market years ago, that was BlackBerry. Other important number is that half of the employees are using their own devices during last year, in 2012. And a consequence of that is that the strategy of letting people to bring your own device is a recruiting tool to reach new generation of people. That is something that particularly happens here at Globant, where people know about technology and they want to use technology. Hey, I think you wanted to speak a bit.
Yeah, just
this part.
One of the things that's also happening is it's also somewhat more prevalent in North America, the BYOD. It's a little bit behind in Europe and rest of the world, but it's definitely catching up. I think a lot of the cultures are used to corporate issued devices, and that's slowly catching up. It's also obviously different in some of the vertical markets like financial and healthcare, but even in those markets we're starting to see BYOD take off, and it's not so much about cost, which is what a lot of people think. It's much more about the employees really requiring and demanding it, and companies realizing that there's a real value. So it's, I think, one of the bigger trends, and it's not going away. Even though I think some people might want it to, that are traditional IT folks, it is definitely here to stay.
Okay, thank you. Well, to try to exemplify some of the market of tools or different tools that have been covered these scenarios. Here we have some more numbers of what the industry of application management, that is a general name of this market of applications that are developed to try to cover some or all of the feature needs by companies that want to secure and manage applications. IDC is being forecasting that for 2016, that market, the market of application management, will grow to 1.8 billion in revenue. On the other hand, the market is starting to shift to containerized solutions. We'll talk about that in later slides. What is a container solution? But it's an approach that basically makes application developer to need to worry less about all these features, doing some things automatically. And this is the third point. I mean, wrapping, the fact of wrapping or SDK-based applications and VPNs basically is the different approach that exists for or making applications secure. These two approaches is one is more automatically and works in many cases, and the SDK approach is basically that the app developer needs to be aware of that the application is going to run in a secure context, needs to do some things in addition to the development. Simaro will speak about this during this slide.
Yeah, so mobility is definitely a trend that is growing, and if you see market numbers, it's growing in some sense from a percentage standpoint faster than other technologies historically. You know, radio, TV, internet, its adoption rate, its revenue, it's, you know, clearly one of the bigger trends we've seen. And consumerization of IT or COIT is driving those users to bring their own devices, which we already talked about. You're definitely seeing a trend towards multiple devices per user. At Aperion, we monitor how many devices each user has, and it's been growing. It's now at about 1.5 devices. A lot of folks have an iPhone and an iPad and maybe something else, or they'll have a tablet device in addition to their Android device. So you're definitely seeing that as a trend as well. Obviously, email, calendar, and contacts is where a lot of folks start from the business standpoint. But very quickly they realized that the devices are capable of so much more than just email, because obviously the BlackBerry did a great job with email and still does, but if you want an iPhone and all you're using is email, you're not really taking advantage of all the capabilities. So enterprise apps became the next frontier, and we're starting to see companies building enterprise apps, and probably at least half of the companies that we're working with in the various industries have either begun to build apps or have a strategy around that. And the primary reason that they do this, and really the only reason, is ROI, return on investment. But how does that actually come to pass? It's through making all those employees much more productive. And this is really the key. And there's a lot of things you have to do as a company to make sure this happens, from the standpoint of app design, user interface, obviously deploying and managing things, and onboarding users. And many of the things that we do at Aperion, that Globant does, is really all about making the user more productive. And ultimately, unless a user actually is taking advantage of this technology, it's not going to make a difference how you develop it. Did you want me to go ahead and cover this slide, or do you want to go ahead on that one, Edmund?
Thank you. I think now it would be good to do a comparison between solutions that provide some kind of help in application management and security of mobile applications. There are literally dozens and dozens of providers, of vendors of this kind of product. We selected these 5 that we'll see on screen, that for any reason or other we consider are the most valuable. And one thing that is really important to know this is that if we made a very extensive comparison chart of features, I mean, to try to compare feature by feature which features implement any of the vendors, we'll find that more or less all the vendors can tend to implement more or less all the features. The thing is, well, that can be true, the way that those products implement the features and the fine detail between the implementation of each feature is very different. And that is where anyone wanting to buy a product of this kind will need to pay attention. Now we're seeing the three main categories where the solutions show some difference. The first and most obvious is that the platforms that they support. Where it's for sure is that all the vendors support iOS and Android. Other than that, other offer support for BlackBerry, for Windows Phone, or Windows Mobile, and there is a big difference in support between versions of Windows Phone and Windows Mobile. Some of them support Windows Phone 7 or 7.5, 8, or Windows or earlier versions of Windows Mobile. So, if your target is to try to do something with Windows Mobile or Windows Phone, you need to be very careful at the time of picking the product and see that that product supports all the features you need. On the other hand, if you are targeting iOS and Android, I would say that more or less all the vendors support fully those main platforms. The second difference is the way that the products are offered their services. All of them offer a combination of both type of solution between on-premises installation of the product, when they offer to install their products on servers running inside the company, or cloud-based strategy that can be cheaper and more and offer a softer entry curve for anyone that wants to invest in this kind of product, but doesn't want to do a great investment from day zero. Of course, that doesn't fit with some companies' policies that requires all software to be inside corporate networks. The last one and more important things for the people that actually do develop applications is how these vendors offer their solution. On one hand, there's a traditional way of integrating with an application that all these or many of these, except for Sempress, offer an SDK that you as an application developer use to manage some features like creating a secure storage or connecting securely or authenticate users or connect the device or all the features. But in that case, you as a developer need to be aware of that SDK. You need to understand how that SDK works, and you need to do some work around that SDK. That solution is perhaps the best for applications that are somehow out of normal. Perhaps it needs a bit of work, or application that store a lot of content, application that somehow won't work with the automatic approach. On the other hand, the automatic approach is to wrap the application. All these products offer an approach where they wrap the application into a secure container. That secure container is a binary wrapper over the application that you don't even need to have the source code of the application that you are wrapping, and all the features are going to be integrated into your app, but just the sole fact of letting the tool wrap the application into a container binary. That approach is, of course, more time-saving compared to the SDK, and it's not a magic bullet. I mean, all applications need to be retested when using a containerized approach. I mean, when wrapped into a container. And it's a very good general purpose approach because it will save a lot of effort, but you will need always a fallback to the SDK approach in certain specific cases. On the other hand, there are many features that are even more difficult to compare because they all the products have been growing over the years to try to offer all the functionality they can or anyone will expect from a product of this kind. For example, synchronization with Active Directory. All the tools offer at some level synchronization with Active Directory, either for getting lists of users or managing groups or many other features. Many of the tools offer SharePoint access or other collaboration tools or integration with content products like SharePoint, and even some kind of content synchronization to automatically make available for the user some specific content on the mobile devices. Another feature that all the products offer somehow is location monitoring. I mean, this is both the ability to restrict the use of location services, and on the other hand, to track the location of the device. App and service restriction is the fact that these platforms offers the ability to restrict which services and what applications they will allow in a certain group of devices or in a certain device of given users. However, monitoring restrictions is the ability to disable some connections of hardware peripherals like printers or Bluetooth keyboards or whatever device. We need to attach memory cards or anything external to the device. Device provisioning is the ability to set up a device out of the box and making filling it with your profile that's pre-filled with certain conditions like the rest of these policies. Over-the-air configuration is the ability to make this setup over there. I mean, without having the device physically connected to a network, but instead, whatever that device is, this opens a window to do the things remotely in distributed environments. These products offer the ability to enforce some rules in password. Password types. Some companies, many of the companies have some restrictions on the password type and security of those passwords. Well, these products somehow offer the ability to extend those rules to mobile devices. Something that is ubiquitous and universal is the ability to wipe an application or wipe a device that is common in the case that an employee left a company and the device is of its own. Well, the company will need to wipe any information that belongs to the company. And the last one is the App Store. As everyone knows, companies will like to host the applications in a private internal App Store that is not shared with the general public. Well, many of these products offer some kind of App Store. This is a very wide topic. I mean, an App Store can be from a web page with a couple of links to something really complex, like a whole site with an approval process, management process, and metrics, and many other features that will make a very complete app store. So the final word for this all the features is that all the platforms support some kind of features of this. I mean, some level of depth with all these features. And anyone that is interested in a particular feature or a particular service from the products will need to investigate into all the products and see which one fits the need.
Hernan, this is Simran.
I will hand it over to Javier now.
Yeah, just on the previous slide, and one of the things I would comment on is a lot of these features are common because obviously in the past the BlackBerry Enterprise server had a whole bunch of rules and people were very used to that security model. And Apple then took many of those and developed a specification called Mobile Device Management, or MDM, which all the vendors use. So that's why there's so much commonality amongst the products, because they all can do essentially exactly the same thing on the iOS side. On the Android side, it gets a little more fragmented, but there's also some standards there. On the App Store side, I think that's a new market because, really there was no need for app stores 5 years ago internally. If apps were built, they were very dedicated, and a few were built and put onto a device. And that's where it gets a lot more interesting, as you said, because it's more than just a store. You've got to have a lot of other things. But the key here is that this environment is in some ways very similar, especially for device management, but then there's a lot of differentiation in some of the newer areas. So anyway, we'll get into some of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Simran. Hi, everyone. This is Javier Simon. I'm the VP Technology for the Mobile Studio, and I would like to take the time to speak to you about the actual development of applications on the enterprise environment. So we've been developing applications for consumers for a long time now, but what changes when we go to an enterprise model? What things that we need to take into account? Is it the same thing? If I'm able to push my simple application to the App Store, to the Apple's iTunes Store, I'm already ready to push an application to my enterprise. What are the constraints, restrictions? Who do I have to deal with? Political issues. Do I have to deal with IT? Do I even have IT on consumer-oriented applications involved in the process of publishing applications? We don't. So those are the things that I'm going to cover during this time. So the first obvious thing that we need to take into account while developing an application is we need to take into account how this application will be distributed. So most of the platforms allow for manual application distribution. You don't have to go through any third party to distribute your application, but that's not the case for Apple. So Apple provides an enterprise store to allow you to do that, to make only to your company available your applications. So your applications won't be available to all the public. So the typical approach is to try to get an enterprise store when you're going multi-platform to go to a similar approach to all the applications. Most MDM solutions provide support to the distributing applications through enterprise stores, as we heard Hernan and Simran speak moments ago. So one of the key things that we need to take into account while developing applications or while planning applications for the enterprise is how we're going to deal with IT. From an engineering point of view, IT plays a key role here. They are the ones who will allow your application to run, to access your infrastructure. Typically, if you're developing an enterprise application, you're accessing the company's infrastructure, services, existing information, and that's not something to be taken lightly. To begin with the most simple case, you need to be able to access to the users of the company. You need to be able to access the account logins, and that's something you must not take for granted. So, and that goes to administration as well. IT usually administers infrastructure. So if you're going to decide on an MDM solution, or there is an MDM solution in place, then both IT and software development should be all in agreement in the strategy that should be adopted. Well, we also heard about the differences between the BYOD versus company-owned devices. So there are some pros and cons to while developing software. Developing software for a company-owned device, it's easier in the way that you know you own the hardware in which your applications will be running. So that's an advantage from the developer point of view. You don't have to test in environments that might be random, such as a user-owned device. Android devices have many flavors, versions, and variants, and even hardware features that are not easy to test. So that's a key feature that you need to take into account. Accessing the information is something that is vital to enterprise applications. As I mentioned before, most of the enterprise applications are meant to access in some way or another companies' information. So companies are typically jealous about their information, and they keep it in safe places, which is called the corporate network. So when you're walking around with your mobile device while on the go, on the street, commuting to work, you're not on the corporate network. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge because the services are beneath the company's firewalls for a reason. The IT security doesn't want that information available on the internet. It makes the company more vulnerable. So why would they make that available to your device? I mean, if your device is allowed to connect from the internet to company-sensitive information, then anyone is theoretically capable of doing so. So there are a couple of approaches here that I'm going to discuss later on how to approach this. So when developing an application, an enterprise application, one of the key things that you need to take into account in order to pass a compliance or not exposing information, critical information to attacks or malicious uses, you need to classify the information that will be either stored or transmitted over the internet or the link that you have with your device. So classifying the information, it usually makes it easier to design your application. So you can design your application's policy. You need to design your application's policy to be very careful with confidential information, maybe less careful, but still careful with private information, and maybe non-sensitive information, then you can just protect with standard security. And the reasons, so the first question would be, why wouldn't we just make everything confidential and make everything the top security measures to begin with? Well, that has some either performance or usability drawbacks. So you might want to say that confidential information cannot be stored in any type of storage within your device. So you cannot cache your application, you cannot cache confidential information, and even if you're caching, you should do so only in memory. Okay, so what's the drawback here? Well, every time you need to access that information, you need to reload that information, so that makes your application less performant. Also, you might there are some other factors that affect security. That is where the user is at. So it's not the same the security measures that I have to have in a corporate network while on a VPN, public network, or maybe I'm offline. This offline method connection is, or non-connection, is a bit tricky, because while the device is offline, there is no way to access the device. So that's something that you need to make sure. While the device is not connected, then you don't get the user access. You cannot wipe your device if your device is not connected. So that can be used against the application in the case of a malicious use. So if you're caching information and you don't want, if you're not caching information of any type and you want the application to work offline, then you're in trouble, because there's no way that you can access information offline, and if you cannot store it while online in a cache, there's no way you can use your application. So that's why classifying information can help you have some degrees of some shades of gray in terms of the application security. So one example of how a difference between corporate or public access can be done. Some companies might even want to activate, only make available the applications within company premises. So in that case, you can only allow the application activation while on company premises, while only connected to the corporate network, not even through a VPN. So there are many cases in which we can leverage classifying network trust and information sensitivity. So the alternative to a VPN can be using the services gateway. This is something that, as a user, as an engineer, you might want to do. But the thing is that most IT or compliance organizations won't allow that to happen, because you don't want to expose that information to the internet. So one of the things that you can do relating to that is either use one of those MDM wrappers or SDKs to access information, or you can just use a mobile VPN client. There are many mobile VPN clients, and some even automatic VPN clients that can connect automatically when requested to your corporate network. So that's something that needs to be agreed with IT security. Some other topics about security and cover device jailbreaking. If you jailbreak your device, then some of your security might be compromised. So you need to take measures against it. So there are ways to detect a device when it's jailbroken. There are also ways to store information in your device encrypted in a way that even if the device is jailbroken, then your information is not compromised. So most of the MDM solutions cover this, but you don't need an MDM solution to get this in place. On the last topic, I wanted to touch base here on application developing our best practices for coding. So when you're developing an application for your company, you typically are either not the first one or not the last one. So there will be more than one application in your company to use by employees. So you need to plan for future growth. So the best way to do this is to develop some kind of framework or SDK to comply with your application. This you can get a lot of leverage by doing so, by reducing the times it gets for your IT security organization to clear your application, because you're using an already cleared or compliant security framework. You don't have to go through any approval processes other than the application or the functionality itself. So you can get a lot out of that. And not to mention the time reduction while not having to code this all over again. And well, I guess that's it for the developing enterprise applications.
Great. Javier, that was great. I really appreciate that, and it's a great introduction to what we have to talk about, which is really overall challenges of developing enterprise mobility. In addition to what you talked about, obviously companies have to think about operating system updates. They have to think about different devices coming online all the time. As you know, a new device comes out about every week. And then ultimately, it's about the ongoing support and management of these apps. It's pretty easy to get your first app out. It's a little more challenging for your second and your third or your 10th. And then you have the added complexity of all the updates of the apps themselves across the devices. So, you know, one of the issues is that we want to encourage companies to work with development organizations and others to build apps, and so we don't want them to feel like it's impossible. And it is not something that is insurmountable. Aperion has developed some solutions around this, but in general, this is the life cycle that every app needs to go through, whether you work with us or not. You first of all have to figure out what apps you're going to have. You may want to buy an app that may be off the shelf, and there's certainly a lot of apps that are available, you know, on the iTunes store or can be acquired privately from development companies. You can build an app, and you can use third-party tools. You can work with a partner that develops those apps using tools or directly. And one of the things you want to be able to do, for example, is have automation of the signing process. This is something that those that are not involved in mobile may not understand, but every app that's delivered has to have credentials, essentially entitlements to run, especially when you build internally. In other words, you're not getting something off of a public app store. And so therefore, whether you're doing iOS or Android or other platforms, you have to actually sign the application. And in the Apple iOS environment, it's even a little more complicated because those entitlements need to be updated every year. You have to make sure you do it correctly, and it's oftentimes a challenge. So having a platform that will do this automatically and do it intelligently and also notify you as an administrator when those entitlements are going to expire is very critical. The next thing you have to think about is protection of apps. And as you said, Javier, you can have SDKs, you can use gateway technology. One of the most well-known products out there is called Good, and they provide a containerized email solution. But to use it, you need to buy their network operations center technology. You have to use their box. And so a lot of companies are moving away from what would be considered proprietary solutions and want something more open. So in order to do that, you need the ability to make sure the code that's developed is secure, doesn't violate any privacy issues. It's nice to have a code inspection mechanism no matter how the app is built. A lot of companies have to worry about compliance. You also want to be able to detect for malware and other practices. And then once those apps are built, you want to be able to apply policies. We prefer wrapping because it's a little more general, but you can use an SDK. And we also provide capabilities like app-level VPNs. And again, a VPN on an Android device will open up your Android device to your internal network. It's potentially possible that other apps running on that device could access the network that might be malware-enabled. So the idea of actually having a VPN directly incorporated into an app for one-to-one connection becomes an important security feature. Integration into the environment is obviously important. You want to be able to have single sign-on, which is incredibly valuable in companies because you can then leverage your existing corporate information about your identity to any system which supports the standards that are out today, including SAML 2.0. You want good reporting, good analytics, and there's many different solutions for that. It will go down to whatever level of granularity you want. Or you can simply say, look, I'm an administrator. I want to know, are the apps getting used at all? Is anybody using them? What's the take-up rate? So there's lots of options there. And other more basic things like provisioning email and obviously deleting the apps and the data after somebody has left the company or if there's a risk. And this gets into the whole BYOD issue. A lot of companies in the olden days, a couple of years ago, if somebody left the company, they'd say, well, that's great, they left the company, we're wiping their device. Well, obviously, that's not ideal. You'd much rather go in and say, we're going to remove just the applications and just the data and just the email box that's associated with the corporate data. The rest of that will be left alone, and that's really best practice today. And then finally, in terms of deploying, One of the things that we find is that companies will want to have a branded experience for their employees. They want to know it's a trusted place to go. The other very important aspect of return on investment is getting your own users, your employees, your contractors to rate your apps, to give you feedback, and to make suggestions on what the next set of apps should be. And this is actually something that the best practices today really demand, because companies really do need to know what are those things that are going to have the highest impact on our organization, that are going to have the biggest ROI, and ultimately will empower employees to be as productive as possible when they're carrying these devices around. And the only way to find that out, once you get past the first couple of apps, which most people will agree on, is to have a way to get that feedback in an organized way. So that is really a very high-level view of mobile application management, life cycle issues. Many of these are issues which go well beyond what we talked about earlier, which is just sort of an app store model. And I think that if anyone is interested, they can directly contact Empyrean or contact Globant, because obviously we can't cover everything in a 1-hour webinar, but I hope that that's a useful overview, and I think I will now go back to take questions. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Cimarron, for your insights. Very productive to have someone knowledgeable on the topic. We're wrapping up the webinar, and just to give some folks time to ask any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the page where you can shout out what potential questions you might have. In wrapping, my suggestion is for this audience to monitor kind of different MDM solutions that are out there, understand the requirements, and see which one fits better, and either Empyrean or Globant, we can assist in finding the right solution for you guys. I want to ask Faust if there's any questions from the audience that we can tackle. Oh, I can see questions down in the Q&A. Perfect. So I'll read out one of the questions we got. What do you see implemented in companies today? Tablets, phones, what do typically companies implement? I don't know, Cimarron, if you have any hard data around the population of devices being implemented.
Well, we definitely do, and we definitely see, first of all, at the operating system level, iOS is still predominant, even though Android, is 70% of the current sales rate overall, right? A lot of that is on the consumer side, but most enterprises still see iOS, at least at the moment, as being sort of a better platform and potentially more secure. Again, this is changing very rapidly. In terms of the devices, we see lots of phones. We see tablets, especially iPads in the executive, and it ranks because a lot of those folks are information consumers. They're looking at documents, they're looking at business intelligence information and so forth. And I think the iPad has really took the industry by surprise when it came out, because it got a lot of take-up rate, especially on the management side. So that's been our experience and our observation.
Great. Then there's a more technical question around SDKs. So when we think of BYOD, bring your own device, does this increase the need to use cross-platform SDKs, like PhoneGap for enterprise apps? And how do using these frameworks impact using MDM SDKs? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think that this is a long discussion, but the short answer is that cross-platform development environments, there's more development environments in SDKs like PhoneGap, Accelerator, Xamarin, and others, are really, I think, a great idea, especially if you have multiple platforms. Ultimately, when you need to do very user interface specific programming, as I think you know at Globant, you need to probably get into the guts of the device much more. But this is a great starting point, and they can do a great job, and they're getting better all the time. In terms of how the integration with using MDM SDKs, we know MDM vendors do provide SDKs, and Empyrean even has one, but we're trying to move away from that, primarily because they are a little more complicated and it adds more test cycles, it requires more work, and we're trying to make it easier on developers, not harder. So we have really moved as much as possible to both a static and dynamic wrapping approach so that policies, for example, there's a question about jailbreak detection. You can put a policy in at a level where the app is going to be deployed and say, if this device is jailbroken, I am not going to run this app. You don't have to build that logic into your application or into the 10 applications that you built. You can simply make it a policy. So at least in my opinion right now, that's a better approach than trying to burn in yet another SDK.
Okay, that's good info around the wrapping and the SDK trends. So again, this is Andrew Berger, GM of the mobile studio here at Globant. Thank you everyone for participating in this webinar. And Fausta, do you know if this will be recorded or will be available for folks later after the webinar?
Yes, you are going to receive all the recorded version of this. So thank you everyone for joining. And you're going to have news for us. So thanks also to the speakers, and thanks Javier, Hernan, Andrew, and Cimarron for joining.
Thank you.